The velvet box slipped from his hand before it even opened. Henry stood frozen in the doorway, staring at two figures tangled in the shadows of their bedroom. His heart pounded, not from rage, but from disbelief. A soft laugh, a familiar voice. His fingers trembled. The diamond ring hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. He was supposed to surprise his wife. Instead, he surprised himself by surviving that moment. That night was supposed to be a celebration. 10 years of marriage. A handwritten letter. Her favorite wine, the ring, custom-made. He'd asked his mother to take Lily for the weekend so they could have the house to themselves. He even left work early. He climbed the stairs, rehearsing what to say. But when he opened the bedroom door, the words vanished. So did the air in his lungs. Rebecca and Thomas, his wife, his best friend, the two people he trusted most, together, laughing like it wasn't the first time. She didn't cry. He didn't apologize. They just looked at him, like the truth had finally been unburied. In one night, Henry lost his marriage, his friend, and the image he had of his perfect life. This is the story of how he lost everything and found something no one saw coming. But at that moment, he had no idea what was waiting ahead. Before everything fell apart, Henry Whitaker was the man everyone wanted to be. Founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms on the East Coast, a striking house perched on the Connecticut hills, a beautiful wife, a bright daughter, a name that carried weight in every room he entered. But behind the prestige was a man quietly unraveling. Work had become his escape. Meetings blurred into dinners, red-eye flights became routine. He convinced himself it was all for them, for Rebecca and Lily. But somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing how distant Rebecca's voice had grown, how she paused before kissing him goodnight, how Lily started whispering her questions to the nanny instead of him. Still, he believed in their marriage, believed that love, once planted, would bloom again with a little care. That's why he planned the anniversary weekend. To water roots he thought were just dry, not dead. He was wrong. The confrontation was brief. He walked in. They froze. He didn't scream. He didn't even cry. Just stood there, ring in hand, while Thomas muttered excuses and Rebecca stared blankly. "You've been gone for years, Henry," she said, voice calm, almost rehearsed. "I got tired of waiting." Divorce came fast. Headlines followed. Tech tycoon caught in domestic scandal. Stockholders grew anxious. Thomas resigned quietly. Rebecca moved out and barely looked back. But Lily asked every night when her mommy was coming home. Her tiny hands clutched drawings that never reached the fridge anymore. She waited at the window, even when it rained. Henry tried to hold it together. He showed up for board meetings, packed lunches, helped with homework, but at night when Lily slept, he sat in the living room staring at the silence. One evening she crawled into his lap and whispered, "Daddy, are you sad when I'm sleeping?" That question cracked something inside him. He realized he was present but not there, not in the way she needed, not in the way he needed to be. And that's when he made the decision. He needed help, not for himself, for her, for Lily. Henry didn't know exactly what he was looking for when he posted the ad. He just knew Lily needed someone who could bring warmth back into the house, someone gentle, grounded, someone who could see the world the way children do, without fear or bitterness. Resumes poured in. Most were polished, clinical, years of experience, degrees, references from wealthy families. But one stood out, not because it was impressive, but because it was honest. Claire Monroe, age 27. Experience, local daycare assistant, no college degree, no formal training, but her cover letter was different, simple, personal. It ended with a single sentence. "Children don't need perfection. They need presence." Something about that line stuck. The interview was short. Claire wore a second-hand coat and smiled like someone who hadn't done it in a while. Lily took her hand almost instantly. By the end of the first week, the house sounded different, not quieter, just softer. Claire baked. She danced in the kitchen with Lily, out of rhythm and laughing. She read bedtime stories in silly voices. She taped Lily's drawings back on the fridge. Henry noticed the change too. He came home to the smell of cookies, to a living room with scattered toys and pillows on the floor. Once he caught himself smiling, just watching them. He wasn't falling in love, not yet, but he was remembering what it felt like to be alive. And Claire? She kept her distance, always polite, always professional. But sometimes, in the rare quiet of the evening, they'd talk about music, about childhood, about grief. Claire told him her parents died young, that she grew up in foster homes, that she never stayed anywhere long. Henry didn't press for more. He just listened. And for the first time in months, someone listened back. But peace is fragile when it's built on broken ground. One afternoon, Henry noticed Claire standing on the porch, pale. Her hands shook as she ended a call. When he asked if everything was okay, she forced a smile and said, "Just an old ghost." She didn't say more. That night, Lily had a nightmare. She cried for her mum, for a mum who wasn't coming back. Claire held her in the rocking chair until she fell asleep again. And Henry, he stood outside the doorway, watching them in the dim light, wondering how a stranger had done more for his daughter in 3 weeks than he had in months. But deep down, he still held his guard. And Claire, she was hiding more than just old ghosts. The change was subtle at first. Claire started looking over her shoulder more often, jumping at doorbells. Once, she left in the middle of the night after receiving a call, only to return the next morning with dark circles under her eyes and an apology she wouldn't explain. Henry noticed, but didn't push. He told himself it wasn't his place. Until one evening, everything unraveled. He came home early to find Claire sitting stiffly at the dining table, her phone trembling in her hand. Lily was upstairs, napping. Claire's face had lost all its color. "He's here," she whispered. "Derek." The name meant nothing to Henry. She took a breath. "He's my ex. We were together years ago. I left him. He was controlling, violent sometimes. I changed cities, changed my number, but somehow he found me." Henry felt something sharp twist in his gut. "Oh, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Claire looked away. "Because people leave when they see the mess I carry." Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. It was a courier, a thick envelope, legal documents, filed by Rebecca, requesting custody of Lily, on the grounds that the child was being exposed to a woman with an unstable history and potentially dangerous past. Henry's heart sank as he flipped through the papers. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them, texts that seemed to suggest Claire had manipulated Henry, that she had lied about her identity, that she had an ongoing relationship with Derek. "Where did this come from?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Claire's voice cracked. "I didn't send those. They're fake. I swear to you, Henry, I haven't spoken to Derek in years." But doubt crept in. Too much had been broken already. Rebecca had lied before, but Claire, she hadn't told him about any of this. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. "Are you using me?" Her face crumbled. "No, God, no." He held up the documents. "Because this says otherwise." She stepped back like he'd struck her. "You think I'd ever hurt Lily? That I came here to trick you?" He didn't answer. Claire turned slowly, walked to the hallway, and returned moments later with her backpack. She knelt beside the stairs, kissed Lily's forehead one last time, and whispered something Henry couldn't hear. Then, without another word, she walked out. The silence she left behind was heavier than before. Lily woke up crying that night, not screaming, not calling for her mom, just quietly crying, like she knew something good had slipped away. Henry sat beside her bed, but she didn't reach for him. She just turned her face to the wall. The next morning, the house felt wrong. The drawings on the fridge seemed out of place. The couch cushions still smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. Claire's baking. And Henry, he couldn't stop replaying that moment. The look in her eyes, the way she didn't beg, didn't explain further, just left. Wasn't that exactly what he hated in Rebecca? The silence, the distance, the refusal to fight for anything. But Claire had fought, just not with words. Still the doubt festered, and Rebecca, She was relentless. Her legal team demanded full custody. She painted Claire as unstable, Henry as negligent. Derek, now suddenly claiming to be Claire's fiancé, backed the lie. The court asked questions Henry didn't have answers for, and through it all, Lily barely smiled. She stopped dancing, stopped drawing. She barely ate. Henry watched his daughter fade, and every night he sat in the same chair Claire once used to rock Lily to sleep, staring at the empty doorway. He had lost again. But this time, it wasn't to betrayal, it was to fear. And you? Have you ever let someone go, not because they hurt you, but because you were too afraid to believe they wouldn't? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, sharing your story might be exactly what someone else needs to heal their own. A week passed. Then 2. Claire didn't call, didn't text. She disappeared the same way she'd arrived, quietly, like a breeze that left behind warmth without asking anything in return. But her absence was everywhere. Lily asked less about her, but cried more in her sleep. The house, once slowly waking up, had fallen back into silence. Even Henry's work, his old fortress of distraction, felt hollow. One night, while searching for Lily's favorite sweater, he opened the drawer in the laundry room. Inside, folded neatly, was a small envelope with his name written in careful handwriting. It was a note, short, no goodbye, no bitterness. If you ever doubt who I am, look at how your daughter laughed. That was real. No one can fake that. He sat down on the floor, note in hand, and for the first time in months let himself cry. Not for the betrayal, not even for the confusion, but for what he had let fear destroy. He thought about Claire's silence that night, the way she walked out without defending herself. She wasn't giving up. She was protecting herself from a man who didn't trust her. Henry stayed up the rest of the night going through camera footage, phone records, and files. Something in him had shifted. He wasn't just a man grieving anymore. He was a father, a man who owed his daughter the truth. And maybe he owed Claire a little more than that. The next day, he called a private investigator. He reviewed the screenshots Rebecca had submitted. Several were doctored, sloppily, if someone bothered to look close enough. Claire's phone record showed no contact with Derek. None. But Rebecca had recently transferred money to an unlisted account. Henry requested a deeper investigation. Within days, it was confirmed. The account belonged to Derek Fields. There were emails, audio messages, proof of the setup. Claire had been telling the truth, and Henry, he'd sent her away. He stared at his reflection in the glass that night, wondering when he'd become so scared of trusting that he couldn't recognize honesty when it stood in front of him, offering nothing but a second chance. The rain hadn't stopped all day. Henry stood outside the small apartment complex, holding an umbrella in one hand and a folded envelope in the other. Inside was everything: the evidence, the apology letter from his lawyer, the transfer papers withdrawing Rebecca's custody claim. He knocked. Claire opened the door slowly, a towel wrapped around her hair, surprise flickering in her eyes. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Henry handed her the envelope. "I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know the truth finally came out." She scanned the first few pages, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for not believing you, for letting my past speak louder than your actions." Claire looked up. "Do you know how many times I wanted to scream the truth at you?" "I do now," he whispered. There was a pause, thick with everything unsaid. Then she stepped aside, letting him in. They didn't talk much that night. Just sat near the window watching the rain. She made tea. He helped dry dishes. It felt nothing like the dramatic reunion he'd imagined, and everything like a real one. Over the next few weeks, Henry made changes. He left work earlier, ate breakfast with Lily, walked her to school. He and Claire spoke more, but slowly, carefully. She came back to help with Lily just for a few hours a day. She was still cautious, and Henry didn't blame her. He didn't rush, didn't assume. He listened. He laughed again. And little by little, the pieces started to fall back into place. Not the same ones, not in the same shape, but real ones. And Henry began to feel something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. But healing was not a straight line. Some nights, Henry lay awake replaying every moment he let doubt speak louder than love. What if he failed again? What if Claire never fully trusted him? One morning, while packing Lily's lunch, he asked Claire, "Do you ever feel like we're pretending?" She looked at him carefully. "No, but I do feel like we're still learning how to be honest with ourselves." He nodded. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared that I'll never be enough, that you'll see what Rebecca saw." Claire stepped closer. "I'm not Rebecca, and you're not the same man you were with her." But what if I fail again? Then we figure it out again." There was silence. Then she added, softer, "But don't push me away just because you're afraid I might leave." It hit him like a wave. He had been so focused on not repeating the past that he was at risk of creating a new version of the same mistake, pushing away someone real out of fear she might not stay. That afternoon, Henry received a call. It was from the court. The final custody hearing had been expedited. Rebecca wasn't done. She had new claims, new accusations, this time not just against Claire, but about Henry's capacity as a parent. And this time, she had Derek by her side, ready to testify. Henry hung up. His hands shook. He looked at Claire, then at Lily, playing in the living room. He had rebuilt so much, but now it could all be taken again. He clenched his jaw. He wouldn't run from this. Not again. The courtroom was colder than Henry remembered. White walls, wooden benches, the kind of silence that forces every breath to feel louder than it should. Claire sat 2 rows behind him, eyes fixed on her lap. Lily wasn't there, by court order. Rebecca entered wearing a tailored navy suit, face unreadable, and right beside her, smug and smirking, stood Derek Fields. The judge began. Rebecca's lawyer painted Henry as emotionally unstable, clouded by personal relationships, neglectful in his decision to keep an unvetted woman with a violent history around his child. Henry didn't flinch. When it was his turn to speak, he stood, hands steady. "Yes, I made mistakes," he began. "I trusted the wrong people. I let fear dictate my actions. But what I never stopped doing, what I will never stop doing, is showing up for my daughter." He looked toward Claire. "I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or perfection. It's defined by presence. And Claire Monroe has shown more presence, more care, and more love to Lily than anyone else since her mother left." Rebecca scoffed. "You barely knew her." Henry turned to her, calm, direct. "Neither did you." Gasps echoed softly in the courtroom. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room. "Mr. Whitaker, do you have evidence to support your claim?" Henry nodded to his lawyer, who presented the full investigation report. Emails, audio clips, bank transfers, every thread leading back to Rebecca and Derek, exposing the setup, the fabricated texts, the manipulation. Even the court clerk paused mid-page. Derek's face went pale. Rebecca stiffened. "I trusted you," Henry said, voice quiet but steady, "even after the affair, even after you abandoned Lily. But this, trying to use my daughter as a weapon because you couldn't stand that someone else brought joy into her life." Rebecca stood abruptly. "This is a lie." The judge silenced her. 30 minutes later, the decision was read. Full custody granted to Henry Whitaker. Restraining orders issued against Rebecca Lane and Derek Fields. Charges pending for defamation, perjury, and child endangerment. Henry walked out of that courtroom into the afternoon light, lungs finally free. Claire stood outside, arms crossed tightly. She hadn't said a word through the entire trial. He approached slowly. "I didn't come here to take you back." She looked up, eyes wary. "I came to ask you if you'd be willing to walk beside me. Not because you owe me anything, but because this time, I want to earn it." She didn't speak. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. That embrace didn't promise perfection. It promised presence. Later that night, Henry sat on the floor of the living room while Lily brushed Claire's hair with a toy comb and declared, "Now you look like a real princess." They all laughed. It didn't feel like a movie ending. It felt like a beginning. Life didn't magically fix itself after that. Claire still had nightmares some nights. Henry still questioned himself when things got quiet. Lily still asked about her mother from time to time, but now they had something they didn't before: honesty, safety, and space to grow. Mornings were slower, breakfasts shared. Lily's drawings filled the fridge again, this time with 3 smiling stick figures holding hands. One of them always wore a dress with a crown. Claire never claimed to be Lily's new mother. She didn't have to. She became something else, something just as sacred, a steady presence, a quiet strength. And Henry? He stopped trying to be the man who had it all. Instead, he became the man who was there. For every scraped knee, every dance recital, every late-night fear. He showed up, not because he had to, but because he finally wanted to. He learned something he never could have inside boardrooms or glass towers. That love isn't about grand gestures. It's about staying when it's uncomfortable, listening when it hurts, trusting even when it's terrifying. Sometimes the people we fear letting in are the very ones meant to heal what others broke. And sometimes the family we build, messy, imperfect, and fragile, is stronger than the one we lost. Have you ever pushed someone away because it felt safer than letting them get close? Maybe you've been Henry, guarded, afraid of trusting again. Or maybe Claire, carrying pain so deep you expect people to run the moment they see it. But here's the truth. We're all carrying something. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. Stay when it's messy. Stay when it's hard. Stay when love feels like a risk instead of a promise. If this story touched something in you, tell me in the comments. Maybe your story, your scars, your strength, can help someone else believe again. And if you believe that real love doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful, leave a like and hit subscribe. Because around here, we don't just tell stories, we remind people that healing is possible, even when it starts in the quietest places.